welcome back to the program. Now, U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy declared loneliness a new public health epidemic in the U.S. last month in an 85-page advisory. So then the question was posed, is Trinidad and Tobago becoming lonelier? Well, first we need to understand exactly what loneliness is from a psychological perspective, if there are different types, and if loneliness affects a specific group of people. Well, I'm joined by President-elect of the TT Association of Psychologists, Ms. Kelly McFarlane. She's with us via Zoom. Hello, Ms. McFarlane. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for joining me. Let's start where I ended my introduction, and that is the definition of loneliness and if there are types of loneliness.
So loneliness is quite a subjective experience whereby a person might feel like the quality or quantity of their interpersonal relationships are lacking or not optimal. So there is a sense of, there are different types, sure. There is the sense of existential loneliness where we feel like really disconnected from the wider world in general or from people in general. There is a sense of social loneliness whereby we feel, again, like our connections aren't optimal or aren't really nourishing or nurturing that part of us that needs to be connected to other human beings. And of course, there's emotional loneliness whereby we have a deep sense of longing for deep connection, but it's even in the connections that we have, we don't feel that level of support.
Mm-hmm. Now, does loneliness actually affect a specific grouping of people? And by extension, what are the factors that contribute to loneliness?
Loneliness can affect anyone, honestly, even people who have lots of people around them, come from big families. And again, this is why it's such a subjective experience. It's a lot of times it's also in the way that we perceive our world or the realities that we've experienced, growing up and so on. So again, sort of inherent in loneliness is this feeling that, the connections aren't safe or aren't healthy with other people or within the world itself. And so we don't think that we could actually be safe in connecting with other people, sharing space, sharing time, talking, feel like people are involved with us, feel like we're being emotionally nurtured. And so anyone can experience that even when surrounded by people, whether the people around us really aren't very connected and aren't very safe, or perceived, being that, let's say in the past, we've had experiences where people have betrayed us or hurt us, and then we've decided, well, everyone is going to hurt us and betray us. So even when meeting new people, we kind of cast a net across everyone and say, oh, I know they're going to betray me or hurt me, and so I'm not allowing myself to connect completely. Now, we are evolved to need and to desire social connection. Mm-hmm. So this goes against the nature of human existence.
Mm-hmm. Now, okay, that leads me to another question, or actually a couple other questions, because one, trying to balance reality and the virtual world, is that also a contributing factor? We are born for socialization, we crave socialization, but we tend, and what we're seeing now is a lot more socialization taking place in the virtual world. How is that affecting our mindsets and even our ability to interact with one another in person?
So the thing about the virtual world is that we get snapshots of people's lives. Oftentimes, the best aspects of people's lives, the most fun aspects of people's lives, and it happens quite rapidly with a lot of people. And so it starts to send this idea that people have these large friend groups and people have all this stuff going on and everybody's all content and happy, because those are the bits that you're seeing mostly. And what I find that happens is that people start now judging themselves and their own lives against what they're seeing on social media. And, it's kind of looking at these snapshots of the best parts of people's life, of many people's lives, is kind of a difficult thing to measure yourself against. And if that's what we start putting our self-worth and our value on, then that becomes a very slippery slope into, discontentment with self, with your own life, loneliness, depression, etc., because it's a difficult marker to hit. Nevertheless, people tend to want to follow and follow the lives of people who have all of that. The more they have, the more we follow. And so that, contributes definitely to this sort of feeling of loneliness and not good enoughness, so to speak.
The other fact is there are some people who just love being alone, who love their own company, who crave that isolation. They actually appreciate that isolation. Is anything wrong with that?
Absolutely not. So we have different personality types. Let's say for introverts get their energy restored when they are alone, reading a good book or just spending time by themselves. And, extroverts, on the other hand, kind of need to pull energy from outside. So for an introvert or for a person who just prefers to be alone a lot of the time, it wears them out, it burns them out to be around people a lot. Now, the difference is, if you are alone, if you spend a lot of time alone, but you're happy and you're content, and that's what makes you, comfortable, that's fine. There's not a problem. That's why we say, it's a subjective experience. It's not a problem to be alone. On the other hand, there are psychological conditions that, make it so that we want to be alone more, some neurodivergence, schizoid personality types. So there are psychological conditions that contribute to it. And then, thirdly, so if a person is spending a lot of time alone, but they feel discontent, they feel, sad a lot of the time, they've been losing energy, they feel a sense of doom or worthlessness or hopelessness in the world, or they're doing it not because they choose to, but they're doing it because they feel that they have to, because people aren't safe. That's when we say, well, okay, maybe we need to look a little further into this, in terms of your health and your well-being. But if you're alone a lot, but you're still able to maintain, good, solid social connections, then that's quite healthy. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are there significant health consequences associated with loneliness and isolation, or even that affecting pre-existing illnesses?
Absolutely. So the mind and the body are very connected. What happens in the mind affects the body, and what happens in the body definitely affects the mind. So when looked up something like loneliness, and loneliness could lead to other conditions like anxiety, depression, etc., that could actually reduce or lower your immune system, right? So your ability to fight off diseases. But loneliness is also linked to things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, other things that are very serious chronic physical illnesses. So it is in fact very much dangerous, for your well-being and your health. In fact, it's compared to smoking a box of cigarettes.
Really?
Yes, it's a serious we call them psychological injuries. It's a serious psychological injury, loneliness and depression. So yes, it's very, very much not a very healthy thing.
That is rather incredible, what you just referred to. Is there, well, with all this being said then, there's an absolute need now to create spaces where people can socialize with each other. But is there also a need to create spaces where we teach people how to socialize with each other?
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. Absolutely. But you know, another part of teaching people how to socialize with each other, or for people socializing with each other, is confidence. You know, and we lose confidence for different reasons, either because we've had negative experiences with people, or we've had negative experiences just right in our homes, in our family, from trauma, right? But so sometimes it's about building yourself from the inside out so that you feel more confident and more able to establish relationships and feel safe in relationships. And so outside of that, certainly, yes, there could be things that, you know, courses and so on that could help us figure out how to make social connections, how to figure out who is safe and when it is safe and what's appropriate if we have a problem with social appropriateness. But again, I think for the most part, confidence building, feeling good about yourself so that you feel comfortable and confident going into other people's space is the primary concern.
I don't want to digress too much, but that word confidence, a huge word. I mean, we could probably have an entire discussion about that. But if we are to actually, raise awareness with regard to that, is there a further need to first teach individuals how to accept and deal with disappointment?
Oh, yes, indeed. Sure, certainly. You see, we don't always get all of the lessons that are important for life and for social interactions and for our continued social development from home. Sometimes we come from a home where the persons who raised us themselves never really knew. And so sometimes we really do need that extra help, and we really do need outlets or places that we can go to learn these things. And a lot of times we don't realize that we need to learn these things, right? So absolutely 100% yes.
Now, in a society which arguably has become so narcissistic, where many people are now just concerned with themselves, taking care of themselves, looking after myself, and at times we can even say that there's this ignorance to one another. How do we now go about? I mean, we're having a conversation here this morning, which is possibly a start. But if that narcissism does exist, how do we try to actually progress? I mean, would that involve you can't change somebody's personality, but could you change somebody's mindset and possibly way of thinking?
Sure, yes. So a lot of times it's kind of what the majority is doing. So again, because you mentioned, you know, social media, and that, you know, we've really shifted into a big social media space, in that lots of people spend hours and hours and hours of their time scrolling through social media. So if the culture shifts, you know, whether it's inherited culture or it's our own culture just happens to shift in that way, you find more and more people start going with the status quo. If that culture shifts back in a different way, then you might find more and more people start going with that. So, for instance, when we start talking about empathy a lot more, and we start convicting people about empathy, I was listening to a radio show recently whereby they were talking about the fact that before helping people, we tend to film, right? We pull out the phones and we film, and that this is such an issue. Now, let's say a year or two ago, it was, hey, yeah, everybody got this on film. It's great. So now we're all getting things on film because that's what we do. Now we shift the conversation to, come on, guys, we don't like this. We're not going to praise you. We're not going to reward you for doing this. We want you to help people before you start filming. So you'd find that more and more people start helping people, or maybe filming themselves helping people, but they will start focusing on, I need to help people other than just film. So that's just an example of, you know, if when we start making mass shifts, it starts with one person or one group, we find that the rest of the culture starts to follow suit eventually, if it's something Our brains have a massive reward system, and we get rewarded by compliments, affirmations, likes, etc. So when we start getting those things, it tells our brains, okay, this is what we need to do more of. So, when we're thinking of trying to get major change in policies and in governments and organizations and cultures, etc., we should think about the brain's reward system and how we could kind of get that on a big or mass level.
Well, Ms. McFarlane, I think we've covered quite a bit, and I think we've opened up other topics this morning: confidence, disappointment, empathy, understanding. Those are just some of the things that we were able to introduce. So there's a lot more to get involved in, but unfortunately we are out of time. So I want to thank you very much for joining me this morning, and I look forward to future conversations as we continue to explore such topics. But for now, thank you, and do have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care. Ms. Kelly McFarlane joining me this morning as we speak about isolation, whether or not there is a growing epidemic of loneliness here in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, confidence, disappointment, empathy, understanding. Those are the 4 words that you need to think deeply about as you go out doing your business throughout the day. And ladies and gentlemen, that's break for news on the hour. We'll be right back after this.